On today's episode, Ninja Warrior, horse trainer, and World's Toughest Mudder 2017 Elite Contender, Adriane Alvord.
This is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to the World's Toughest Podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's World's Toughest Mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the World's Toughest Podcast.
Welcome back to World's Toughest Podcast. My name is Will Hicks. Thank you for listening. On today's show, Adriane Alvord. She is a Ninja Warrior. She was an elite contender at World's Toughest this past year, and she is a professional horse trainer by trade. I saw her at World's Toughest this year, and instead of her name, she wrote Unbroken on her bib. We talk about why she did that. Before we get started, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at @TheWillHicks and on Instagram at WillHicks. You can subscribe to our World's Toughest newsletter by texting the word tough to the number 22828. That's tough, the number 22828. And you can be a part of the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. They have told us they would prefer us to call it Apple Podcasts instead of iTunes. But you know what I'm talking about. That's the Purple Podcast app on your iPhone or on iTunes on your computer. I legitimately love the reviews. Thank you very much for those. Before we talk with Adriane Alvord, let's talk about some Tough Mudder news. We talked with Jim DeGoat Campbell a few episodes ago. Tough Mudder has 4 new obstacles for 2018, which is less than they usually roll out. We're used to them having 6 or 8 new ones each year, which means 6 or 8 old obstacles get retired. They send them out to the Tough Mudder farm where they get to run around with all their old obstacle friends. Quick aside, do you want some real talk? My family has a dog, and he is not doing well. His hips are going bad, and he's in pain, and it seems like he has aged 10 years in the past 6 months. He won't eat snacks anymore. He used to like cheese and bacon. He won't even eat, like the treats that he used to love. So my wife and I have been having the "is it time" conversation. She's had a bunch of dogs over the years that have gotten old, and they've had to be, put to sleep. But I told her, I've never had to do this. We had dogs when I was a kid, but we never put them down. They always just ran away. And as I was telling her that, I realized that's what my dad told me. Maybe that was they went to live on the farm. But now I'll never know. Unless I call my parents and ask them. But now I'll never know. Anyway, this year, Tough Mudder opened up the obstacle vault for people to vote on 25 of those retired obstacles. Those are the ones Jim and I talked about. In the U.S., Team HQ picked the top 9 obstacles and will be bringing them to a course near you. I said in the U.S., I'm going to talk about the U.K. in a second. I haven't seen any vault announcements for any other countries other than the U.S. and the U.K. So in the U.S., here are your 9 vault obstacles. Boa constrictor, hump chuck, human gecko, just the tip, lumberjacked, rope-a-dope, trench warfare, twinkle toes, and cage crawl. If you want to know more about each of those obstacles, check out that episode with Jim Campbell a few episodes ago. My favorite 2 obstacles of that list are cage crawl, where they have a chain link fence about 3 inches above the water, and you're in the water with your face up against the fence, pulling yourself through. And twinkle toes, which is walking across a long balance beam that sways side to side. They've mixed up that obstacle in the past to make it different. They put blocks halfway through it that you had to kind of climb up and then back down on. They have put electrical wires along the side of the beam so you can't scooch your way across. One time, instead of having a 4x8 or a 4x10 that you walked across, they had these rough-hewn logs that you had to balance across. It's a simple obstacle, but it's fun. Tough Mudder says every course will have 2 or 3 of the vault obstacles, but you won't know which ones will be on course until you get there, or until you look at the course map online the week before. If they really wanted to be stinkers about it, they could do that mystery obstacle thing and just put a question mark on the map. Do you want to know a secret about that? 9 times out of 10, if there is a mystery obstacle on the map, that really means we don't know what we're going to put here, and we've got to put something here, but it's time to publish the maps, and we're not ready yet. And that's too much to fit on the map, so they just say mystery obstacle instead. I voted for Crybaby, the tear gas obstacle that they only had for a year. People tended to love that one or hate it. Like electroshock therapy. I'll tell you this. If they put up electroshock therapy for a vote, there is no way it would make it in the top 9. It wouldn't make my top 90. There are people that love it, but they are wrong. For more on the vault obstacles, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/world's toughest pod. The UK, you guys got vault obstacles too. I'm sorry. You guys got 2 vault obstacles. I don't understand this at all. If Ian Kay or Daniel Stevens or Will Chung or any of my other UK listeners has some insight, let me know. Tough Mudder UK announced their vault obstacles, and they are Cage Crawl, which we just talked about, and King of the Mountain, which is a bunch of hay bales stacked up that you have to climb up and over and then climb down. And it's fine. It's fun. And it definitely tends to be the best smelling obstacle, which isn't saying much, I know. But the UK Legionnaires online don't seem too excited about that obstacle. Sorry about that, England. You guys need good obstacles, too. I'm sorry. You guys need 2 good obstacles. Speaking of Ian K., he sent me a link to this video on Spartan Race's Facebook page. Normally, I wouldn't even mention this, but it's a voiceover guy yelling at a normal-looking lady. I promise you, this is 100% real. They paid money for someone to make this.
Are you ready? It's the mother of all obstacle races, and it will literally tear your face off.
I just want to stay active and challenge myself. Is that part of your race?
No! We have brand new obstacles that don't translate to fitness in any way, like the Devil's Colostomy Bag, Smallpox Coffin, and the Revenge of Rachel from Friends.
Look, I want a race that encourages me to be better, a race that inspires me.
We have this guy!
Who wants to taste victory?
I'm done here.
Where are you going? Our obstacles are so insane, they will find your grandmother and hide her meds. Insolent!
I'm running a Spartan race.
No!
That is 100% real. At first, when I saw that, I was like, really? I'm going to go through Spartan's old YouTube videos and look at them side by side. Who's really got the bro team? But about 1 minute after I started that project, I decided I couldn't do that to myself. So Melissa Dugan got on Spartan's Facebook page, that post with a video, and posted her thoughts, which got deleted immediately. I didn't hear about this until a day after it happened. So when I finally checked it out, I was thrilled to see the top comment from Jim Campbell hadn't been deleted. If whoever is running Spartan's social media knew who Jim is, they would have deleted it immediately. Melissa Dugan and Jim Campbell they're both frequent guests on our podcast and very active members of the World's Toughest community. Probably the two most active members of the World's Toughest community. As I'm recording this right now, Jim's comment is the top comment on the Facebook thread, on Spartan's Facebook page. Jim said, "Who says Spartan obstacles aren't innovative or multifunctional?" And posted a link to a video of a class of 7th grade kids banging drumsticks on upside-down 5-gallon buckets. Spartan Race is known for their bucket carry obstacle. If you never run a Spartan Race, one of the obstacles they have is you put rocks in a bucket, you carry it up a hill and back down a hill, and then you dump the rocks out of the bucket. They've actually upgraded it recently. It's Bucket Carry 2.0. This is 100% serious. I'm not making any of this up. Their Bucket Carry 2.0 already has the rocks in it, and it has a lid. I promise I'm not making a joke. Anyway, the video Jim posted, it's just 30 seconds or a minute of 20 kids banging on buckets. The only thing better than the 20 kids banging on buckets is the one kid banging on a cowbell. I've said before, I have a lot of respect for Joe DeSena and Spartan Race. Joe is the CEO of Spartan. I feel like they're doing what they want to do, and they're very good at doing that. I enjoy watching their U.S. Championship Series coverage on NBC. Those are great. But whoever has been doing their social media lately, I don't know. I follow Joe DeSena on Twitter, and he's a personally inspiring guy. He's crazy hardworking. He's ambitious. He's motivated. His two missions in life lately are to get OCR in the Olympics and to rip 1 million people off their couches. Both great goals. And on his Twitter, he would post like once a week or once every other week something he'd been thinking about or some challenge to, his tribe of Spartan racers. And sometimes it was cheesy, but it was genuine. You knew Joe had typed the words himself. But now it's a corporate, mushy, mealy-mouth, hashtag-ridden wasteland. They post regularly every day at regular intervals designed to maximize engagement across all channels and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, another thing. Some people were talking smack on that thread to Spartan, and Spartan's social guy thinks he's Wendy's or Moon Pies and is just bad-mouthing people. And I really don't like corporate snark. If you're going to have that attitude, you need to own it. I need a name and a face. Come on, Spartan Social. You're better than that. Piss and Cox have a new video out.
We're relevant. Mom! Cheers. Relevance.
Carlo Piscatello and Josh Cox were doing the weekly World's Toughest Mudder updates before it was cool. This will be their 4th year of videoed shenanigans for the WTM community. You can find a link to their latest video on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Good to see you again, Josh and Carlo. Before we talk with Adriane Alvord, let's read some iTunes reviews. The first review is from the U.S. Swivey writes, "Not from Australia. 5 stars. Wow. Thank you, Will Hicks. I found you on iTunes and love the podcast. I have never run a Tough Mudder yet. You are helping me get ready. I got into OCR 2 years ago during my turning 50 mid-age crisis. Better than Red Corvette, I suppose. After 8 Spartan races, including last year's Beast in Tahoe and Big Bear, I feel like I am back in my element. I used to run all over my family farm in Missouri as a kid, climb trees, swim in ponds, and crawl through creeks. OCR is like being a kid again, and I love your energy. We'll meet someday soon, I'm sure." Thank you, Swivey, for the kind words. I'm glad you found us. You mentioned feeling like being a kid. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that on a course, especially at Funky Monkey. People say, I haven't climbed monkey bars since I was a kid. And I know it's real easy at the start line to look around and see all these people that look like they're in better shape than you or younger than you, but 90% of them haven't touched a monkey bar since they were 10. The start line can be intimidating, but it's just like everything else. No one's looking at you. They're worrying about themselves. There's a quote that goes something like, when I turned 20, I was worried about what everyone thought of me. And when I turned 40, I didn't care what they thought of me. And when I turned 60, I realized they weren't even thinking about me. And Swivey, you're right. There are a ton of worse ways to spend your time and money now that you've turned 50. Tell your wife it's keeping you out of the pool halls and the saloons. Next review is from Canada. What's up, Canada? Warbsy writes, 5 stars. Hi, Will. Love the podcast. Listen to it regularly. With regards to Evan versus Woods, while I don't defend Ryan at all, I think Evan and his particular podcast episode is childish. Funny, yes, but childish. Evan thinks he's a lawyer. If he's got an issue with Ryan, which he obviously does, I'm thinking this podcast wasn't the venue for it. Ryan cheated, he got caught, admitted to it, and accepts the punishments. This is important. And he's banned. Are more witch hunts required? Definitely entertaining, but wow, doesn't help the sport. Too bad. Warbsy, thank you for that review. He's talking about the first episode of Season 2, The Talk, with Evan Preparis and Ryan Woods. Warbsy, you might be totally right. I got more feedback on that episode by far, like not even close, than any other episode I've ever done. Hundreds of comments, bunches of people sharing it, and several people felt just like you. Not most people, and not a lot of people even, but I did get comments like, that was Jerry Springer 2.0, or both the guests and the host should be embarrassed to have been a part of that. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I said in that intro to that episode, this is not a typical episode. And it's not. And it's not going to be. The yelling and the conflict get more downloads, and it gets people fired up and talking about the show, but that's not what we're about. That's not what I'm about. That was a difficult episode to do. And I don't care about the downloads. I get paid the exact same if I get 2 downloads or if I get 2 million downloads. I'm not saying we'll never have an episode like that again, but it's not going to be a common thing or even a regular thing. But I appreciate your feedback, Warbsy. Thank you. Our last review is from Zager Bombs. Pass ORM, 5 stars. Love the podcast, but I'm mainly leaving a review, so this podcast passes ORM's podcast. 5 stars. Thank you, Zager. He's right. We recently passed ORM for most reviews and most 5-star reviews in the Apple Podcast or iTunes store. I'm very excited about that. To be fair, ORM did win the Mud Run Guide poll for favorite OCR podcasts. But that's all right. I don't mind losing to Matt. He's a friend. He was the first OCR podcast I listened to, and he's been doing it for 5+ years. So we are on the brink of our 1-year anniversary. February 8th will be 1 year for us. We're not supposed to win it that fast. Here's the part that bugs me. Second place was won by Joe DeSena's podcast. They don't announce past second place. We don't know who won third. We won third, but we don't know that. Joe DeSena is the CEO of Spartan Race, I mentioned, and he does a business leader / motivation kind of podcast. The only thing OCR about it is that it has Spartan in the name. It has literally nothing to do with obstacle course racing. Spartan Up is an OCR podcast like carrot cake is a vegetable. Spartan Up is an OCR podcast like electroshock therapy is therapeutic. Spartan Up is an OCR podcast like it's not. It's not an OCR podcast. It's okay, though. Living well is the best revenge. Actually, getting more reviews is the best revenge. As I'm recording this, Spartan has 571 reviews, and we have 92. So first we have to get past 100, and then we have to catch them. I said this in a previous episode. We got those 92 reviews in this past year. In the past year, Spartan has gotten like 20 or 25 reviews, so we'll catch them. It'll just take some time. If you'd like to be a part of the show, like Zagerbombs, Warbsy, and Swivey, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, too. Just open the Purple Podcast app on your iPhone and search for Tough Mudder. Our logo is the first one that pops up. Click our logo and then scroll down to click Write a Review. I sincerely appreciate every review. Thank you. It's time to talk with Adriane Alvord. Let's go to the phones. Adriane Alvord, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Adriane, tell me about your first Tough Mudder.
So my first Tough Mudder was in 2016, and I decided to sign up for World's Toughest Mudder. I actually did it because somebody told me I couldn't do it, and they were like, I told them, I'm like, I want to finish in the top 10, and they were like, nobody ever finishes in the top 10 in their first World's Toughest Mudder. And I was like, you watch me. I really hadn't done any training. I just kind of threw myself into it, and I ended up fracturing my feet on the course because my body was so not ready for it. But I ended up ninth, so 70 miles. I completely shocked myself my first year at World's Toughest.
What did those friends say when you said, hey, yeah, remember that top 10 thing you said I couldn't do?
I think my friends have learned to not question what I do anymore. Cause, I feel like when I first started doing the endurance stuff, they were like, you're crazy. You're not ready. You haven't trained. There's no way. And I was like, no, I can do it. I can totally do it. And it's those long things are so mental. So I think now people know, Adriane's crazy. She has the mental grit. If she says she's going to do it, the girl's just going to go and do it.
World's Toughest wasn't your first 24-hour race, though. Tell me about your BFX experience.
Yeah, so that BFX 24 was my very first 24-hour race, and I had done 3 8-hours prior to that. So I had done Sail Hill's 8-hour polar bear challenge, and that was my first one. The first time I did it, I was 5th at it, and going into it, I was like, there's no way I can run for 8 hours. There's just not a chance. And I just kind of kept surprising myself, oh, wow, I'm still going. And then I decided to do when BFX had their regular extreme, I did that. And then I won that and totally shocked myself. And then I went back to Sail Hill right before BFX 24 just to get one more kind of long one in, and I won that. So I was like, okay, I've done 3 8-hour races, 24 hours. It's just 3 of those together. So all I have to do is just do what I did, but by times 3. So I went out there not really knowing what to expect and how my body was going to handle it. And it was crazy because as the race went on and once I got past that first 8 hours, I actually kept getting better and better. And I kept just waiting. I'm eventually my body's going to crap out. And not that I didn't have those moments of oh my God, it's 3 a.m. and there's no one in these woods and there's raccoons in these woods and going through the ocean in the middle of the night. That was scary, but my body seemed to do better the longer the race was. So that gave me confidence going into World's Toughest for the first time that I knew I could do it.
So you got 3rd place at BFX in your first 24-hour race.
Yeah.
Is that why you thought you could do so well at Worlds?
Yeah, and actually, that race was so crazy. I was in 2nd up until my very last lap. Sarah Watson and I and Morgan was just way in front of us. There was no catching Morgan. Although I heard at one point, apparently she got worried I was going to catch her, which in my head, I was just so shocked I was in the top 3. And I always wait longer in the race to kind of move ahead. So I think I was 5th or 6th in most of the race. And then overnight is when I moved into the top 3. And I told the person pitting for me, it was Adam Washburn who was pitting for me. And I said to him, I'm I am going to move into the top 3 at 3 a.m. And I came into the pit at 1 a.m. and they said Lindsay had decided to stop. And someone was right ahead of me. So I was okay, I'm going to make the move. I'm going to pass Sarah. And so I did. And we were just for hours and hours, I was just ahead of her. I would see her, she'd be next to me, and then I'd take off, and then I'd be just ahead of her, and I'd see her, and I'd take off, and then she ended up failing the monkey bars. And when I finished the penalty, I came around to the volunteer, and I'm did Sarah pass me? And we were oh, I don't know. And then I was finishing, I was on the last mile of my last lap, and Victor Quizzato walks up to me and goes, when did Sarah pass you? And I was like, oh my God, you have to be kidding me. And he was like, she's only 2 minutes ahead of you if you want to chase her down for one last lap. And I was like, you know what? This is my first 24-hour race. Like, I already feel like I might collapse and die. It's so hot out here. Like, I'm just gonna cross the finish line and be happy with my third place. So once I had done that and like known how well I had done, and that I probably could have done better if I pushed a little bit harder, I felt pretty confident that getting top 10 at my first World's Toughest was for sure possible.
That's a thought that creeps into a lot of people's heads when they're kind of near the end of it. Like, oh, I've already had a good day. It's kind of you're fighting your brain. Like if your brain was at 100% right then, like I need to make a push. But it's tough to fight that feeling. Yeah. Like, oh, it's already been a good day. Like I'll just take what I got.
Yeah, and it so is. And I'm trying to work on that part for the mental aspect, because that's like where the race is long. It's the very end. And like Yancey even told me when I was at the California clinic a couple weekends ago, he's like, you need to be able to like push your heart rate really high at the end of the race, because like that's what Allison had to do at World's Toughest this last year. Like you think like so much train for endurance, but it's like being able to push your heart rate high and like stay mentally strong. They're like, okay, you had a good race, like you were in the top 10 or the top 5, but if you have that extra bit of grit, like are you able to like break the top 3 or win? So I've been really working on that coming into this year, just that mental part of just sticking up, being super tough to the very last minute.
You had a really good 2017 in Tough Mudder, but before we talk about that, tell me about Ninja Warrior. You've done it twice?
Yeah. So the first year I did it, and it's funny because like I feel like most people that go on the show, like it's been their dream their whole life. And I always loved watching Ninja Warrior, but like I'd watch it and I'd be like, that's crazy. Like there's no way I could ever do that. And then like, so I just popped into my head in 2015, and I was just like, for the end of 2015, right when the applications were in, it was my first year. I was old enough, and I was like, you know what, I have to do this. And I don't know what it was, but it was just like, I have to do this. So I put an application in, and I had a really good application. So I didn't know how it worked. And then like months were going by, and I didn't hear anything. So I was like, well, I guess I didn't get on. And it was right before BFX 24. So like all of my training had been like my own training without help had been for the long races and nothing for Ninja. And then I found out like 2 weeks prior that I got on, and it was the weekend after BFX 24. So I was like I was so excited, but I was totally not ready. So the first season I like choked and slipped up on the first obstacle. Super embarrassing, but
the very first obstacle?
Yep. Oh yeah, right at the floating step. I was at the end of it. In my defense, I was like about to go to the rope, and I just slipped right off of it and into the water. And so I was like, well, that was like a long drive for nothing. So I reapplied the second year. I knew like there's not a big heads up if you get on. Trained hard, went to the Ninja gym, I got back on, and I actually managed. And like my only goal going back was like, don't fall on the first obstacle. Like don't fall on the floating steps. Like I got through the floating steps, and I was just, everything after that, I was just like so shocked. And I ended up falling off like the floating wing nuts. And this is like such a typical like obstacle course racer mistake. Is I feel like for OCR, like you're like taught like don't ever let go, right? Like no matter how like wet the obstacle is or like how tired you are, like hold on so tight, don't let go. So like these wing nuts was like you had to do a side lâcher, so you had to swing and jump to the side. And I was like getting decent at just regular lâchers, but it was always hard for me to like let go with my back hand. So I'm on this obstacle, and I'm just like in shock that I'm there. And I get this. At first, I only get one hand on it, so I'm like dangling from one hand for like a solid 30 seconds. I'm just dangling, and I can't get my other hand on it. People are like, "What is going on?" Finally, I get my second hand back on, and I go to make the transition to the second one, and I got onto it, but I didn't let go with my other hand, which I don't even know how my wingspan was long enough to do that, but it catapulted me backwards, back onto the trampoline, and then back into the water.
Oh my gosh.
So, but then I came out of the water, and like the whole all the Ninja Warrior producers were there like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I was just so excited because I did so much better. And then they say to me, they're like, "Oh, like you're in fourth right now for the women. You need to stay and wait to see if you make the top 5 and see if you qualify to come back for the city finals." And I was like, "What? Are you kidding me?" And that was at like midnight, and they run until 7 a.m. And Jessie Graff was going later. So I'm like, there's, she's going to beat me, obviously. So I'm going to be at least fifth. And for sure, another girl's going to beat me. So she went like shortly after that. And then literally somehow I managed to stay fifth. So I had to stay there and wait for like 7 hours to find out that I'd come back the next night. And it was like such a roller coaster of emotions. I was so excited and nervous. I didn't sleep at all between the 2 nights. And then I came back and I literally fell on the one obstacle I told them I wasn't worried about, which was the second obstacle. So it was disappointing, but at the same time, like I knew when I made that mistake, it was just a matter of just like nerves. I didn't handle my nerves well and I was just too tired, but yeah, it was an exciting weekend to say the least.
Do you think you're going to do that again?
I reapplied this year, and actually they called me yesterday asking me for more information. So fingers crossed to get back on. They said if I do it again, I'll be going back to Florida. So I really hope I get to do it again because I'd like to get back to the city finals and not do worse than the night before. That's the next goal.
This is kind of not a tenuous connection, but Maggie Thorne, Jessie Graff's best friend or college roommate, she actually placed second at World's Toughest Mudder several years ago.
Oh, did she? Oh, yeah. I saw that. So it's crazy when you can take an extreme endurance athlete and they can do, like, it's so out of my element. And the fact that she can do both is amazing because they're so different.
So last year you ran 5 of the 6 toughest mudders. You ran all 5 that were in North America, and you were very consistent. Let me read your stats. In LA, you got 30 miles, 9th place. Atlanta, you got 30 miles, 6th place. Philly, you got 30 miles, 5th place. Canada, you got 30 miles, 7th place. And in Chicago, you got 35 miles and 6th place. How did you stay so solid, like almost exactly the same every single race?
I know, yeah. I think I'm actually really, with endurance things, I'm very consistent. And I knew that going into 8-hour races. I think some people see how long that is. And they're like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, what if the weather's bad? For me, like, I thrive in the more miserable it is. So, like, the best I did was Philly, and that was, like, the most miserable conditions. And I don't know, I just, like, kind of zone out and keep going and tell myself, like, it doesn't matter how hard it gets. Like, I don't care if my feet break. Like, I'll keep going. Like, I'm just going to, that's what I do. And so it was actually really difficult because I was so consistent. I was, like, consistently just right outside of it. It was like, oh, good job. Like, you're 6th again. And I really wanted, like, the elite contender status because I knew, like, 24 hours is much more my wheelhouse of what I can do well in because it takes me so long to get going. That it made it hard to be, like, just a little bit above my consistency. But you just got to go into the race thinking, like, really positive and just tell yourself that no matter how hard it's going to be out there, you're just going to keep going. If you think like that, like, you can pretty much do the same at every single race and hopefully gradually get better, which finally, the last, the Chicago one, even though my placement wasn't my best, my mileage was the best, and I definitely was running the best. And then that one for sure had, like, the biggest competition. Like, all of the elite contender girls were there, except for Lindsay, I think.
What was the difference between Chicago? You got 5 miles more in Chicago than the other 4. What was the difference in Chicago?
I think it was later in the season, so my endurance and my speed was a little bit better, and then it was also a very flat course, so it made it easier to get more miles in. And they also waited a little bit. It was kind of a frustrating race because they made this big buildup of it, like, oh, we're going to make it so hard, and the obstacles are going to be really long penalties and all this. And they didn't even, like, open up the obstacles you could fail until, like, 2 or 3 a.m., which really sucks for me because, like, that's where I get ahead. So I remember running and looking at my watch, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm running way too fast. Like, this is just too fast. You need to slow down, Adriane. And every lap it was like that. I was like, I'm running way too fast. Like, when are the obstacles going to open up? And then when they finally did open them up, most of the penalties were faster than the obstacles. So there were girls that were just bypassing the obstacles and going straight through the penalty. And I was like, no, like, even if that's faster, like, this is training for World's Toughest. Like, I'm going to do the obstacles. And I think I only failed, like, 3 obstacles that entire night. So, I think just the speed and the way that they set up the penalties made that a higher mileage race. But for me, like, I would prefer really tough obstacles and, like, maybe have lower mileage. But do better in the placement. I just think that's better training than just run really fast for 8 hours.
This next year, they've said that the elite contenders are going to be the top 3 spots instead of the top 5 spots like last year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's, I get it. To me, I kind of think it's a little bit ridiculous because if you look at how many people actually qualified as an elite contender, it was like 25 people total. I think there were like maybe like 12 girls or something. I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but it ends up being like the same people. So it's already so hard to get it. And then it isn't like really a fair representation of who's going to be good at the 24-hour races. Like in somewhat it is, but 8 hours and 24 hours is so much different. So I don't really see the reasoning behind it. I guess it's going to make us all train harder. So I don't like it, but at the same time, like I'm still going after it, and I'm really hoping I'm going to be able to do it.
With your mileage, Adriane, if you add, one more lap to each of those races, you're on the podium every single time.
Yeah. And I've actually gotten, I'm already quite a bit faster. So I found out, I went to like this super clinic that Richard Diaz and Yancey put on. And, they had like the whole, all my training with Yancey, it's all like heart rate training, like you stay in certain zones. Well, like all last year, I kept thinking like, this just feels like my heart rate was saying I was like where it's supposed to be, but I always felt like, man, this just feels really slow. And I'm like, stick to the numbers, like that's what we have to do. And then I go to the clinic, and it turns out like my max heart rate is much higher than normal for my age. So I was literally like training 10 to 20 beats lower than what I should have been all year. And since I've changed it, just from changing that, like I'm already like a full mile to mile and a half faster per hour. And I'm like, that right there is all I need. Like, assuming that everyone else doesn't get a huge amount better, I'm really confident that now, like, my training is going really well, that I'm going to be able to get in the top 3, hopefully.
Are you worried, when we talked about Ninja Warrior, are you worried at all that your training for endurance is going to affect your Ninja Warrior or vice versa?
For me, Ninja Warrior is just kind of like this personal journey for me. Like, it's not like my ultimate goal. Like, the ultimate goal for me is like more the toughest mudder and world's toughest mudder. Like, I want to have a chance at that 100 miles. So, like, from whatever, I think the grip training is really good for tough mudder, but, like, I can't focus much. If I want to do really well in world's toughest mudder, I can't, like, only work on Ninja Warrior. So I'm not, like, too worried about it. If I end up sucking on Ninja Warrior because I'm going after 100 miles, like, then so be it. But, the top A&W is, like, more just to have fun.
So you qualified as an elite contender for World's Toughest 2017. How did World's Toughest Mudder 2017 go for you?
That race was incredibly depressing for me. It started out great. I felt like the strongest I ever felt before it. I was so focused. I had like 3 people on my pit crew. Like, Yancey was there coaching us. It was just, everything was like set up to be successful. And I had like all of my laps timed out to try to get 100 miles. And like, I know that was a very ambitious goal, but I'm like, why go into it like settling for like a super easy achievable goal? Like, I want to go for it. I'm going to do, I wanted to really finish in the top 5. Like, that was like the realistic goal, but then it's like, well, but maybe I can get 100 miles. So I mapped it all out. And the race started, pretty similar actually to how Chicago was. Like, it was just running. There were barely any obstacles open up. And so, like, I was coming in, like, way ahead of my predicted lap times. And I was ahead of my pace for the 100 miles. But I knew, like, once obstacles open up, like, it's probably going to change a little bit. So I think it gave everyone, like, this false sense of hope. Like, oh, look, like, your dreams can come true. And then obstacles, like, oh, my God, it's going to happen. I remember being at, like, 25 miles in. And I was like, this is going to happen. Like, I'm going to get 100 miles. I felt awesome. Then the obstacles opened up, and I was really, like, relieved, though, because even though I was ahead of pace, like, I don't even know where I was at standing-wise, like, probably outside the top 10, which I knew that was normal for me. Like, I just stay steady, and eventually I creep in once everyone else crashes. So obstacles open up, and when it was still, like, kind of dusk out, like, I was getting through everything fine, and then everything gets really wet, and it got really cold, and they put, like, all the hard stuff, like Funky Monkey was, like, directly after that stupid, I don't remember what it's called, the one where you, like, go through the tube and fall in the water. So your hands are soaking, It's cold. I keep making it like to the very end of Funky Monkey and then falling. And then you just penalty. And then there's like freaking Arctic Enema, like right before the Kong with a little bungee in the middle. So your hands are soaking and you're going through that. So I kind of just started getting like in this angry mindset, like kind of like you got my hopes up and like now, and I ended up like I was running faster and faster, but all of a sudden like I was starting to fall behind like my predicted lap times and like right around like 45 miles, I slipped just a little bit off of where I like wanted to be, so I was starting to fall behind that pacing. And but I was still doing great. I was moving up. I think I was either like right outside the top 5 or 5th. And I get up to stage 5 clinger, which, I mean, I've never failed. I've done it like so many times. And I don't know like what happened, but I was going to like make the transition over top of it. And at this time they had switched it to the monkey bar side, which it's like, yeah, let's just wait until like it's thoroughly soaking wet. It's freezing cold, and then we'll switch it to the harder side because that makes sense, right? And I'm going to go over it, and someone was up there, and they're like, oh, you know, they're going to give me a hand. And I don't know if, like, he thought, like, I was good or I thought I was on top of it, but, like, next thing I know, I'm, like, falling from the top of stage 5 clinger, and I fall back directly onto my head. And I've had 5 concussions prior to this. And I remember thinking, like, God, the ground feels like really hard. And they're like, oh, my God, do we need to get the medics? And I was like, no, like, I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. So I take off running, and, like, I didn't really feel pain, but I just felt weird. And, like, everything just kind of seemed off. And this was, like, right about midnight when this happened. And I jumped off the cliff, and I came into the pit, and I said to, like, my pit, and I was like, I just fell off a stage 5 clinger. Like, I can't believe I did that. But I'm really bad about, like, knowing when I'm actually hurt and, like, knowing when to stop. And so they just thought, like, I was just making a comment, like, oh, I fell, ha-ha. And they're like, okay, you got to go. You're this far behind your split, blah, blah, blah. Send me back out. And I'm running, and all of a sudden, like, I'm running crooked. Like, I can't even run straight anymore. I'm, like, falling off to the right. And I'm like, okay, like, this is weird. So I'm like, I'll just walk. I'll walk and see if it goes away. And then, like, where I thought walls were, like, the whole depth perception was off. Like, everything was skewed to the right. So I tried to, like, aim to the left to make myself straight, but I was still going to the right. And so halfway through that lap, I, like, stopped. And I saw a medic. And so I'm like, hey, I'm having these symptoms. Like, I'm not sure what to do. And the medic was like, it sounds like you need to call your race. And as soon as he said that, I got so pissed, and I was like, I'm not calling my race. And I took off, and then it just kind of gradually got worse and worse and worse and worse. So finally, when I got to the cliff on that lap, I was like, I have to call it. Like, there's something not right here. And so it was really, really depressing because I feel like I prepared. Like, I was ready for my feet to break. Like, I'm like, if something breaks, I'm going to keep going. Because, like, those kind of things, like, it's not good for you, you know, but you can, like, out-suffer the pain. But when it comes to your head, like, you can't do that. Like, it will screw you up so bad. And I knew that. Like, I already had the history of these concussions. But then there's that part of me, that, like, fighter in me that's like, oh, but you can fight through this. It's fine. Like, you can keep going, but you can't. Like, you're going to, like, fall off an obstacle and be knocked out. And, you know, if you keep doing that. So it sucks. But I feel like as time's gone on, I've gotten, like, a little bit less bitter about it.
You sound like you were kind of running hot there for a while, like running angry. Yeah,
a little bit. You mean like after I got hurt?
Yeah, well, like even the whole thing, like, because Tough Thunder Made, that might have been the hardest, world's toughest course they've had. People from 2011 to 2012 would probably disagree, but it's, at least as far as Vegas, that's probably one of the hardest courses they've had.
It was a lot different than 2016. And, like, I am all for hard obstacles. Like, don't get me wrong. But, like, I even had, like, a little bit of a stink afterwards. And I still feel the same way. Like, I don't think this was just emotions talking. That I don't think it was the safest race. Like, as far as landing areas. Like, I even went back after the race and looked. Because I remember thinking, like, I never fallen on stage 5 clinger, so I couldn't compare to it. But I just remember thinking, like, it just felt really, really hard. Like, granted, yes, I've had a history of concussion, so it's a lot easier for me to get one. But when I looked at pictures, like there was barely any mulch under like the right where you do the transition. So it was really thick and mulch like back towards the wall of it, which like who's gonna fall right there? You know, if you're gonna fall, you're gonna fall on like the transition side or the monkey bar side. So it's super thick back there, and then it actually stopped like right the line, right where the transition area was. For like previous races, they build it out like way in front of it. So if you fall, you still fall on the mulch. I don't think I fell on the mulch. Like, I'm pretty sure my head hit the ground on the desert, like the hard desert ground. So like to me, that's just crazy. Like it's the 24-hour rate. And even if you look at last year, like you look at how much mulch they had bedded underneath of it, it was so thick. But there was like none. This like why? Well, and I think it was like that for the Berlin wall. Someone else was saying. I looked back at pictures, and it was right. There was like barely any mulch. And like what happened with Morgan, like there's been a lot. I've seen a lot of people fall pretty bad there, and I love Funky Monkey. Like I don't want them to change it, but I think they need to find some ways to put better precautions in case you do fall, because you're going to. It's 24 hours. Like you're gonna fail an obstacle. So it just needs to be safe that if you fall, you're not going to knock yourself out.
You mentioned Morgan, your BFX buddy. She also fell on Funky Monkey, and she was on track for a good race too. She did really well at the Spartan Iceland race. She won it, and she looks like she's on track for a good 2018. Do you think the injury can maybe motivate you for even a stronger year this year?
It definitely does. And I had wanted to go to Iceland with Morgan. We had talked about it because we were like, oh, concussion buddies, like let's go to Iceland. And but then my PT, I went to a PT afterwards for my head, and he was like, Adriane, no way. Like it took a lot longer than I thought to recover. But now that and it was really depressing for a while because just every time I went back, they'd be like, okay, this is going to be your last appointment. And they'd be like, nope, you're not ready yet. Like, you can't work out yet. You can't this. And so it just felt like, oh my God, like, am I ever going to be normal again? Because my vision was so screwed up after that. But now that like I'm recovered and my eyes are normal again, like I am so hungry to go back and just like destroy it. So it sucks, but I feel like it makes for a better story in the end for next year when I do better, because I will not hit my head and I will do much better. So yeah, it's definitely motivation.
Talking about 2018, how many of the toughest mutters are you planning to run?
I think I'm going to run at least 5 again. I want to do the first one in March, so that's like a month away now. And then I think I want to do all the ones that are in America, and then I want to do, which I think is 4, right? There's 4 of them here. And then I want to go to Berlin in September, because I was actually born in Germany, and I haven't been back there since I lived there. So I'm like, it's perfect. The end of like one of the last toughest, or it is the last toughest. And like, how cool would that be to run in Berlin?
I think those international races are going to be a surprise because we don't know those athletes as well. So you might be able to like win the whole thing, or, we don't know. You might finish like 10th. Yeah, I have no idea, which I think that makes it even more exciting. And the good thing about that one is like, because it's been the season, like I know it'll be my strongest then. So like, bring it, German athletes. Like, I'm part German. I'm coming for you. A lot of the OCR people that we follow on Instagram just post pictures of themselves working out at the gym, but you have a lot of different pictures on your Instagram. Tell me about Dressage. Yeah,
so that's like my regular person job, which I don't think most people can say. My mom's a horse trainer, and so I've been around horses my whole life, and growing up, like that's all I wanted to be. Like, I want to be a horse trainer, and I did really well as a kid and a teenager, and I actually ended up on the junior Olympic team for dressage in 2015. But I like set out like that was going to do what I was going to do. I told my parents like when I was like 17, I'm like, if I can't take my horse to college, like I'm not going to college. And they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then 18 rolled around, and like my family like kind of fell apart, and they're like, you can't take the horse, and all this stuff happened. And I was like, okay, well, like, peace out. I'm leaving home. I left home at 18 and just like started my own business. So, yeah, it's definitely, I think it's actually really good for the endurance stuff because I'm active all day. And I think that's why I was able to do well at my first couple 24-hour races without really training, is even though I didn't have structured workouts, I would like work out like after I ride, but I'd be riding for like 8 hours all day, horse after horse, that it's given me a good mindset to just keep going. Like no matter how long the day is, you just keep moving, keep riding horses, keep, throwing hay bales in, between stalls, and just keep moving. So it translates well. Like even though it's so much different than OCR, it helps me in my training, I think.
Now, what is dressage? You're training other, like your customers or clients who bring in their horses and you train them for them?
Yeah, so dressage actually means training in French. And so the whole idea behind it is like everything you do with them, it's all natural. So essentially they say like all the movements in dressage a horse can do naturally on their own. And it was actually like started for the military and for them to maneuver through battle. So it's kind of like, it's essentially like ballet on horses is the best way I can describe it. Like it gets harder as you move up the levels. Like the basic stuff is just like, so it's literally like circles in the sandbox in the start. But they really focus on like how balanced the horse is, like how strong they are. And as they get stronger and stronger, you get to do like these crazy movements, like trotting in place or like having the horse skip. But it's not really like a matter of, it's not like a trick. Like it actually takes a lot of strength for the horse to do that. So like my job is if people send me horses and training that either they want me to teach them like up to the levels or they have a horse that they want to learn on. So like I end up teaching like the horse and them how to move up the levels. And it's really exciting. It's exciting to see a horse go from like not being able to do anything to all of a sudden like they're whipping out these crazy dance moves,
I saw your bib at World's Toughest this year, and instead of your name on the back, you wrote Unbroken. What does that mean?
Yeah. So back in 2015, and I guess it really kind of starts just like from my childhood and when I left home, like that was hard. But then, like, 2015, so I was 21, I got involved in, like, a really abusive relationship, which didn't start out that way. It's never how you think it is. Like, you see all these stories of, like, oh, this guy, like, beat up his wife. And, like, everyone thinks, like, oh, the guy's, like, this dead, drunk beat and has, like, this huge criminal record. Well, like, this guy was, like, seemed really great, really nice. My parents loved him, and he just, like, very slowly broke me down. And then it got to the point like where I was so lost, like I had no idea what was going on. Like I had no idea if it was like my job or like where I was living or if it was him. I was just so miserable. It was because this guy was just like feeding me all these really awful things and like telling me I was worthless and telling me I couldn't do anything. Like everything I wanted to do, he said I couldn't do. And it got so bad to the point that like he started like abusing me and hitting me. And I didn't even like realize it was going on. I was so lost. And so finally got so bad that he assaulted me and I got my third concussion and strangled and messed up my hand. And it was like just then when that happened, it like hit me like, oh my God, this is happening to me. Like this was happening, this is what's wrong. I'm being abused. This is a horrible situation. And I immediately, as soon as he got off me, I called the cops. I told him, get your stuff, get out. And, like, I feel like that was, like, the turning point in my life. Like, that's not the only thing in, like, my Unbroken story, but, like, that moment was, like, the point where I was like, I have to take my life back. I have to get out of the situation. I need to start over. And I don't want to die. Like, prior to that, I just wanted to be gone. I just did not want to be there. And at that moment, I finally wanted to fight for my life. And so I write Unbroken on my bib and for Ninja Warrior just to like show people that it doesn't matter like what's happened in your past or how hard it is, like you can overcome it and you can live an amazing life. And looking back on that situation, like it was really traumatic for me, but like there's people who have been through way worse. Like you hear people like, who get really sick and get cancer and almost die, or like these women that actually do get killed by like their significant others. And it's just, in those moments, I think people think like my life can't get better. So I just hope that like through being open with my story, that maybe someone who's in a similar situation can see like there is light outside of it. Like, and you are worth, like you do deserve a good life. Like you deserve to have everything you've ever wanted. And if you're going to work hard for it, like you can do it. So that's kind of like the meaning behind the whole Unbroken thing for me.
You mentioned that it didn't start out like that. And then you sort of came to a realization. How did you realize, hey, this is not how a person should be treated?
Yeah, it's weird because looking back on it, like I see there's like a lot of warning signs. And I think the biggest thing is that he was really controlling. So like when I first met him, he did like everything with me. Like he got my horses ready for me. He never left my side. And like all my relationships prior to that were like the exact opposite. So to me, I was just, and like my parents had a really bad relationship. I never had a good relationship to model after. So I just thought like, oh, maybe this is what it's supposed to be like. But knowing now, like that was a big warning sign. And I remember feeling like really uneasy about things in the beginning, thinking like he wasn't doing anything bad, but I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I'd say for other people, like if you feel that way, like definitely listen to those gut warnings. But definitely like it was when it first started hitting me, I always was able to like think like, well, I deserved it. So that's like what, he would say to me, or like he convinced me it like didn't happen, or I'd be like, well, like, yeah, maybe he did this, but I did this, so I deserved it. But then like the final time that he assaulted me, which was the worst, it was over like such a trivial argument. It was just so ridiculous that I was just like, this is insane. Like I don't deserve this. This is not my fault. It's looking back on it, I can see why it's such a problem and why there's so many women that are in these situations, because it's not just like this douchey guy comes and starts beating you. Like it doesn't start that way. Like these people are master manipulators. And I even found out afterwards that the girl before me, he did the exact same thing to her, like to a T. So they have past of it. It's not, you're not alone. Like it's not just you. And it's so easy to feel that way in the moment. Like, man, maybe it's me. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I deserve this. But you don't. Like, it doesn't matter how many mistakes you could be like the worst person ever. You could be like so selfish or like obsessed with yourself, but like you don't deserve to get beaten,
What would you say to other women who aren't sure if they're in a situation like yours?
I would say that if you're thinking it, then you need to take a serious look at it. Talk to people that you trust. Tell them exactly what is happening. Like, don't hide any of it. And say, like, what do you think of this? And then they need to get out. I think if you're questioning it, then it probably is, because, it's just, don't wait. I think about a lot of these people that do end up, like, getting seriously hurt or killed. Like, they miss all these warning signs. It's so upsetting. And, I even had someone who I just, like, recently started dating who's, like, the nicest guy. And one of the first times I was hanging out with him, I said, I told him what happened, and he was like, like, you're so lucky that you're alive. And I'm like, what do you, like, I just thought it was so crazy of him to say. And he was like, your story is no different than, like, the UVA girl that got killed, She's like, he just threw her against a wall and strangled her, and it killed her. Like, he didn't mean to kill her. The guy wasn't like, I'm going to kill this girl. Like, he got aggressive. Who knows how many times that happened before that? Like, and that's how these people end up in these situations. And it's like really, it's hard for me, like, just thinking, I know there's so many girls going through it, that I want to do my part to help and, like, raise awareness and just tell them, like, if you're feeling unsure about it or questioning something, or if it doesn't feel right in your gut, then, like, it isn't. And if you feel like they're separating you from your friends and your family, like, that, you're getting to the point where you're going to start being abused.
I'm not sure how to transition back to World's Toughest.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's, like, really intense.
No, this is probably the most serious conversation I've ever had. I've been doing the podcast for a year, and this is probably the most serious conversation I've had.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you asking those questions and bringing it up, because I think it is important. I think a lot of people turn a blind eye to it. And I do have to say that the OCR community was the most supportive people I had during that time, helping me afterwards. So, I think if you are in a situation like that, you have to find things to get out of it and find worth in your life again. And like Tough Mudder and that whole community, like, those are the perfect kind of people to help you with that. So I just think if people, whatever your struggle is, like, it doesn't have to be that, or who knows, like, maybe there are other girls in our sport that are experiencing that. Like, talk about it. You know, talk about it, because, like, these people will help you. Like, I can't tell you how many people helped me and watched out for me and did things for me to make sure I was okay after that.
How did the community support you? How did they rally around you?
Well, this person that did this to me actually used to race. So, like, after it happened, I had like race organizers making sure that, like, this person stayed away from me. I had people checking in on me on obstacles and make sure I was okay. I had people, like, just checking in on me and, you know, just really, like, listening to what happened and letting me know, like, you're not alone, you're going to be okay, we're going to make sure you're safe. And eventually, after, like, a few races of this guy finally stopped racing. So I think he, like, got the point that, like, he wasn't going to get near me. And it just made me feel like I wasn't alone, you know. And when you're in those situations, like, these manipulative people really try to make you feel like the only person you have is them, and they try to convince you that, like, everyone else in your life actually doesn't, like, care about you, or they're not after your best interest. So when I left, I was still feeling, like, really lonely, and the OCR community just made me feel so welcome and, like, made me see, like, you are so strong. Like, you're strong and you made the right decision and you are not going to do this alone.
So 2018, you talked about Toughest Mudder. What do you think for World's Toughest Mudder 2018 in Atlanta? What I think about 2018 World's Toughest Mudder? Are you going to win the whole thing?
I mean, that's the plan. Yeah. I really want to get 100 miles. And I think I'm going to go into it more of, like, I want 100 miles instead of, like, I want to win the whole thing, because you just don't know, like, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to show up. So I think that's more the plan of, like, if I focus on my mileage and meeting my times, if you get 100 miles, like, let's be real, like, you're either going to win or be, like, in the top 3. So I'm just going to keep training hard, keep doing my Yancey camp workouts, do what Yancey says, and hopefully win the whole thing. I think it'd be really surprising. I don't think anyone is necessarily expecting me to be the person to win it all, but I know I can do it.
Adriane, do you have any sponsors or anything you'd like to plug?
I am sponsored by Second Skin, so I do love their stuff, and if you want something that's durable and is going to hold up, I would highly recommend their stuff. I know they're newer, but I've tried, you know, I'm, like, the most reckless person on the course, and I swear, like, up until I started wearing Second Skin, I would rip my pants every single freaking race. Like, there's literally a picture of me on Funky Monkey at the end of Toughest LA, and my pants were, like, split right by the crotch. So if you want something that's not going to split right by the crotch, just definitely try Second Skin.
Where can people find you on social media?
My Instagram is Unbroken Adriane. So if you want to follow some of the crazy stuff I do and a little bit more about my story, you can definitely follow me there. And you can see some of the interesting workouts I do on the farm. And then I'm on Facebook too, but Instagram is a little bit more fun place to follow me. If you want to follow horse stuff, then follow me on Facebook. If you want to see crazy horse workouts for Ninja Warrior and Tough Mudder, then definitely Instagram.
Unbroken Adriane. How do you spell Adriane?
Adriane.
Adriane Alvord, any last thoughts on World's Toughest Mudder?
I think that's it. I think let's just get ready for an awesome year, and I can't wait to see everyone. I can't wait to see how strong everyone's got, and I'm ready for some fierce competition with some amazing ladies.
Adriane Alvord, thanks much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Special thanks to Adriane Alvord for appearing in this episode. Well done, Adriane. She told me off mic that this was her first podcast interview, which I had a hard time believing. This could be a big year for Adriane. Good luck. We are at the start of a new season of the podcast and a new season of Tough Mudder. I would love to get some information from you. What topics would you like us to talk about this year on the podcast? Is there something we missed last year? Or maybe something we talked about but you want more information on? Or is there someone you think we should talk to that we haven't talked to yet? Kevin Given sent me a very nice email with some genuine constructive criticism. Here's what you did well. Here's where you could improve. I appreciated that, Kevin. Thank you. You can email me privately at willhicks@gmail.com, or if you don't mind sharing with the class, you can post your thoughts in a review on Apple Podcasts. I would be interested in seeing them, getting your feedback. If your constructive criticism is, "You're terrible," then you can send that straight to my Hotmail. I check my Hotmail about once every never. Thanks again for listening. Go spend time with someone you love. Maybe your dog.